Hello, this is Stan from Tability, and this is going to be a quick video to explain how you can turn that big plan that we looked at yesterday. And so that big plan really started at 10 years, like what kind of company you want to be in 10 years, that looks at what you need to be in 3 years and 1 year. It's a great exercise, but the problem with this thing is that it's very much focused on KPIs, and it doesn't really help you or your team to understand in which buckets you'll need to put your efforts in the next 12 months. So this is why we need to have like a different plan that is looking much more about the outcomes you want to get, but what's the best way for you to get to those things. And that's what I call the PFM. And so the PFM stands for Purpose, Focus Areas, and Measures. And I'll get to it. So first, a bit of background. So this is inspired by my own experience at Atlassian. So we had a thing called the VTFM, which was also inspired itself by Salesforce V2MOM. And so both companies, they have thousands of people. And so the idea for us was to find something that was a bit more simpler and compressed. So we took some elements out of it, and this is what we came up with. So first, you have your purpose, and this is why you exist. Then you'll have like 2-3 focus areas, which are the best way you can grow, the themes that you want to focus on for the next 12 months. And then for each one of the focus areas, you're going to define some measures, which is going to help you understand what success needs to look like at the end of the 12 months. Once you have that, you'll be able to divide things into quarterly plans, but I won't get into that today. That's for the next sessions. Okay, so before I dive into creating that plan for our company, Askawoof, I just want to briefly talk about 2 tools that can be really helpful. And they're helpful to understand what you need, what your focus areas can be. So the first one is the product lifecycle, and the second one is the AARRR Funnel. So the product lifecycle is just a simple way for you to divide the stages, the life of your product or your company for different stages. So to briefly cover everything, so introduction phase is when you're getting started and you're trying to figure out who your customers are, what your product needs to be. This is introduction. Then you hit that MVP phase. You have something solid that people want, so you can grow. And then here it might be because you ran out of customers, the market is saturated, or technology is changing. But you start to get into that slower phase that gets, that's a maturity phase. And then people are leaving your product, your company for other things. And this is a decline stage. Right, so this is a pretty common thing that you would observe in many different types of product, whether it's B2B or B2C. The other model that is interesting here is the AARRR Funnel. And so the AARRR Funnel, it's a simple way for you to think about the journey of your customers through your company. So assume you have a website where people can go and sign up, and then they use a product, etc. This is what it looks like. So acquisition is about how many people find out about you, how many people get to your website, then how many of these people are going to go from reading your website to signing up. So that signing up is the activation phase. So they just signed up, they try your product the first time. And then the next question is, how many of these people that signed up come back tomorrow, come back the next week, come back the next month? So that's retention. Then you take all these people that you managed to retain, and then you look at how many of them are bringing other people to your product. So that can be bringing the colleagues, but also bringing new types of customers, like people that that will then go for the same acquisition, etc. funnel. So how many people help you expand your product? And then out of that, you finally look at the holy grail, the revenues. So you have that funnel, and you go from basically people that are signed up to how those signups convert into money. Now, these 2 things separately are very interesting, but as I said, it's all about combining them to help you think about the focus areas that you need to have. And so this is how I combine them. And the idea is to think about where is your product at. So if you're just at the beginning of the introduction, like my suggestion is to focus really on validating your idea. And to do that, you want to look at acquisition and revenue. So acquisition, because you want to understand if you'll be able to distribute your product once you built it, and revenues to understand if people will pay for it, right? So if you don't have a positive answers to those two things, then it's going to be pretty hard for you to build a business. Once you know that and you have an idea, like you have positive signs here, you can move into building a product. So that's the introduction dev stage, which is about like creating that MVP. And here you want to make sure that people stick. And so to do that, first you want to focus on retention and then activation. And what I mean by that is that it's not urgent for you to figure out if people can onboard your product. You could do that manually, right? So you could go to someone and say, hey, look, I have this idea. We built a product. I'll create an account for you. I'll set everything up. But I want to know if, day to day, like this is useful. So you can start with that and make sure that you have something that is useful. And then once you have a positive answer there, you can move into like simplifying, the sign-up process, making sure that the onboarding is as easy as possible. And so you want to figure that out. And once you have it figured out, then you can move into that growth stage. So you don't want to hit the growth stage before you have a solid activation and retention product. Otherwise, you just like bringing a lot of people to your website, you're asking them to sign up, and then most of them are going to go away. So growth stage, it's about acquisition. How do you find leads? How do you find people that want to try your product? And then for the people that have tried your product and that like it, can you convince them to bring more people onto your platform or onto your product? Now you hit that maturity stage as we talked about, and in maturity, it does make sense for you to spend a lot on growth. Well, there's not a lot of customers to grow. And so what you want to think about is like, okay, first, how can we keep the customers that we have? And that's retention. And second part is revenue. So not revenue from a necessarily like, let's hyper grow our revenue, but more, can we optimize our costs? Like, does it make sense for us to keep developing new features? But also you can start looking at, like out of the most valuable customers, what can we do to make them happy? And maybe we can start raising prices. Raising prices really becomes something you want to do in the decline phase because people are leaving you. There's nothing you can do about it, but some customers will take more time than others, and they might have like a willingness to pay more because it takes them more time to switch out of the current technology or your product to something else. And then you kind of like want to reinvest, redirect your effort to thinking about a new idea. What is that thing, now that your product is declining, is there something else that you can do to keep on existing as a company? Okay, so this, as I said, it's a bit of time that I spent on that, but the idea is to help you understand what can be your focus areas if you're just getting started with this model and struggling a bit to understand what you can do with your team. Okay, so now let's go back to a company. As a reminder, it's a company called Wolf. They do NPS as a service. And so the first thing you want to figure out is a purpose. And so they have that, and their purpose as a company is to help every other company to excel at product. So this is what they want to do. And now they have to figure out what are their big levers for the next 12 months. And this is what they came up with. So the first one, because they still, I'm going to go back here. So what they looked at, they're like, oh, well, they believe that they're around this stage, right? So they still need to figure out a bit, what the product is, but they can start hitting, they'll soon be able to start hitting the growth stage. And so for them, in terms of focus areas, it's still about activation and retention primarily. So they want to accelerate the aha moment to make sure that people can see value as soon as possible. And they want to go vertical on NPS. And what I like, what I like with focus areas is also to be explicit about what you're not doing. And so saying we want to go vertical on NPS is saying we don't want to do other types of surveys. We don't want to do product market fit surveys. We want to make sure that we're great at NPS no matter what platform you use. Then the third focus areas is about acquisition, and it's, as I said, it's about them preparing that future growth stage, and so they want to become a thought leader on customer feedback. And now, in terms of measures, three things, there are measures for each one of the focus areas. So in activation, it's really about, it's like how can they make sure that new signups see that value and they see that value as quickly as possible. For the retention stage, they have like a typical retention metric But you can also move away from KPIs and have like critical projects that you want to deliver. So because they want to go vertical, for them, they have critical projects like make sure that support email, in-app, and mobile as well. Mobile together. And that thing that is here, 4,000 pieces of feedback per week, that metric is actually taken from that big plan that they made, and that's the KPI that they had at one of the KPIs that they had for year one of what they need to be as a company. In the acquisition thing, you find as well one of this KPI from the big plan, which is the 200 customers, and then you have like one KPI around leads. And this one, I'd like to talk about it as well, right? So 100 pieces of content, you could argue that they should be looking at how much of that content is read. But if you're just getting started, it's hard to get an idea of like what's a good amount of readers. And so rather than spending a lot of time, trying to compare yourself to others, I'd say try to keep it simple. And 100 pieces of content is great thought leadership. It means that you would have to have figured out, what are the things that people are interested in, and you can just use that as a proxy of success. And once you get a sense of, how much traffic you can get onto your website, then you can start building like growth metrics from there. Like you'll establish your baseline, and from that baseline, you'll be able to like understand what's a realistic goal for you. Sorry. So now this is it for me. So if you have any questions, so you can find me at stan@tabidity.io, and don't hesitate to reach out on Twitter as well. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to try our product as usual. Okay, see ya.